Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. This is what's been going on in Iran and the Middle East in the past 24 hours. Today's picture across the Middle East and the wider system is less about new explosions or headline shocks and more about something arguably more important: institutions being built while the underlying disputes are still unresolved. You can almost think of it like scaffolding going up around a building that is still actively shifting underneath it. And the center of gravity right now is the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is pushing a structured arrangement with Oman that would formalize how the strait is administered. On paper, it's framed as navigation services, coordination, and maritime management. In practice, it points towards something bigger: a system where Iran is no longer just a disruptive actor in the waterway, but a participant in the rules that govern access through it. That distinction matters, because alongside that diplomatic effort, there is a very real operational reset underway. Maritime traffic is slowly moving again through Hormuz after months of disruption tied to the US-Iran conflict. But this is not a clean restart. It looks more like controlled movement under supervision. International maritime authorities are coordinating evacuation of stranded commercial vessels. Hundreds of ships were effectively frozen in the Persian Gulf, with thousands of crews stuck for extended periods. Now you're seeing phased movement through designated routes, coordinated between Oman, international agencies, and both regional and U.S. stakeholders. But even as ships start moving, the system is still behaving like a risk-managed environment, not a normal trade corridor. And that's the key tension. The waterway is physically reopening, but politically, it is being redefined at the same time. Iran is also trying to shift the conversation from disruption to regulation. Instead of being seen as a state that threatens closure, it is positioning itself inside a framework where transit is continuous but conditional, potentially tied to fees, services, or administrative oversight. That is where the long-term leverage sits, not in shutting the strait, but in shaping its operating costs and rules. Now, layer the nuclear track on top of that, and things get more complicated. Public messaging out of Washington and Tehran is still diverging sharply on what has actually been agreed. U.S. officials are describing progress on inspections and broader nuclear transparency steps. Iranian officials are pushing back, saying there is no confirmed arrangement granting inspectors access to key sites, especially those previously struck during earlier escalation phases. The International Atomic Energy Agency is trying to bridge that gap, saying inspections will move forward and that technical arrangements are being worked out. But the reality on the ground is still undefined. Dates, access, and scope are not locked in. And that uncertainty is not just procedural. It goes to the core of what makes any nuclear agreement enforceable. Without clarity on inspection reach, the deal remains politically visible but operationally incomplete. One of the most sensitive underlying variables remains Iran's enriched uranium stockpile, particularly material enriched to levels close to weapons-grade thresholds. That issue has not been resolved in a way that removes strategic ambiguity, and both sides know it. So you've got a situation where diplomacy is moving, but verification is lagging behind it. Now shift to the economic layer, because this is where the deal becomes tangible very quickly. Sanctions relief tied to energy exports is already beginning to open liquidity channels for Iran. That includes oil sales, shipping access, insurance pathways, and financial routing mechanisms that had been heavily restricted. The effect is immediate: more hard currency entering the system and more flexibility for Tehran to stabilize domestic pressures. Iran is already signaling it will inject foreign currency into its economy, starting with targeted allocations to industrial sectors and essential imports. That's a short-term stabilizer move. Inflation control, import capacity, and domestic liquidity are the focus. But there is a second-order concern sitting behind it, and it's the same concern you hear repeatedly from Gulf capitals and parts of Washington. The question is what that liquidity becomes over time. Iranian leadership is not hiding the fact that economic relief strengthens state capacity. The debate is about whether that capacity stays economic or translates into military rebuilding. Missile programs and drone production are specifically excluded from any emerging constraints discussions, which leaves a wide strategic gray zone. From a Gulf perspective, that is where skepticism is highest. Countries like the UAE, Kuwait, and Bahrain are not just looking at the immediate economic flows. They are looking at whether the long-term architecture still allows Iran to reconstitute regional leverage after stabilization. That skepticism is showing up in diplomatic conversations during high-level regional visits. There is support for de-escalation, but concern that the deal structure is uneven. Sanctions relief moves faster than military and nuclear constraints. Now bring in Lebanon, because this is where the diplomatic framework collides with ground reality. A new deconfliction architecture is being discussed involving U.S., Iranian, and regional stakeholders, designed to monitor ceasefire conditions and reduce escalation risk between Israel and Hezbollah. The intent is to create a structured communication channel around incidents, violations, and enforcement. But the design choice is already politically loaded. Israel is reportedly not directly included in the mechanism. That matters because it changes how information flows in real time. Instead of a shared monitoring table, you now have asymmetric access. Iran-linked networks and Hezbollah-aligned actors maintain ground presence and rapid reporting capability. The U.S. relies more on layered reporting chains. That difference affects both timing and interpretation of incidents. In parallel, Israel is still maintaining forward security positions in southern Lebanon and has not signaled any immediate withdrawal under current conditions. Lebanese and U.S.-backed proposals are exploring phased pilot zones, where Israeli-held areas would be transferred to Lebanese army control, with training and vetting support. Hezbollah has rejected the framework entirely. So what you're looking at is a three-track system that does not fully align. Diplomatic deconfliction mechanisms, Israeli security doctrine, and Hezbollah operational reality are all moving on separate trajectories. And even small incidents in that environment matter more than they would in a stable system, because each one becomes a test of the broader framework's credibility. Zooming out again, there's another layer of instability sitting above all of this: energy and aviation risk management. European aviation authorities continue to treat the region as a conflict-sensitive airspace environment. Advisories remain in place across Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, and multiple Gulf corridors. Airlines are being told to assume that short-notice disruptions are still possible. That is not normal behavior for a region that is fully stabilized. It signals that risk models still assume escalation potential exists. Energy markets are in a similar holding pattern. LNG production in parts of the Gulf is beginning to recover after wartime suspensions, but full normalization depends on sustained maritime security through Hormuz. That creates a feedback loop. Shipping stability supports energy recovery, but energy flows themselves depend on confidence in the shipping corridor. So each part reinforces or undermines the other. There is also a quieter but important legal and political pressure track developing around Gaza. A UN commission has issued findings alleging deliberate targeting of children and potential violations reaching the level of war crimes and genocide. Israel has rejected those findings. Regardless of political positioning, the strategic effect is increased international scrutiny at a time when multiple ceasefire and de-escalation frameworks are already under negotiation pressure elsewhere in the region. Finally, inside Iran, there are signs of internal military restructuring following the recent conflict cycle. Reporting indicates overlapping leadership roles across major command structures, suggesting consolidation or reorganization of authority. This kind of adjustment typically reflects lessons learned from coordination challenges during high-intensity conflict. It is less about immediate battlefield posture and more about preparing for sustained strategic competition. Thanks for listening and being part of this growing community. If you found this valuable, I'd really appreciate you leaving a review or sharing a quick comment. It helps others discover the show. We also publish a daily written intel brief on Substack at restrictedhandling.substack.com, where we go deeper on Russia and China, along with analysis on Iran, the Middle East, and the DPRK. Have a great day. We appreciate you being here.